And what would go into, removing biases that exist in our society and among the communities that we live in?
Well, biases are how the human brain operates. So your brain can process about 40 bits of information at a time, and it's exposed to however million bits of information, right? And the gap between that is covered by your biases. So there are biases that exist that keep you safe, and that's why they're here.
Mm.
But unfortunately, our biases about people aren't right, but they feel right because we've continually, all of our media, all of our books, all of our continues that all of this is true, all of this is true, everything you think. So I would say that, biases are how the human brain works. We shouldn't feel ashamed of that, but we need to measure, test what our biases are, and then be dealing with it. I mean, Harvard University has a great tool online, Project Implicit. You can go online and test your biases for yourself. And then you can do that self-education to figure out where your gaps are. So yeah, exactly. There are ways to deal with this. We just aren't dealing with it largely.
Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a vodcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. If you're new to our channel, consider subscribing to it and hit the bell icon so that you can never miss an update. Our episodes go live 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. India Standard Time every day of the week. I am your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I am privileged to welcome a very, very accomplished individual from Boston, USA, Dai Ciruolo. Dai, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored to be here.
Thank you. Dai is the head of inclusion of Jambb. She is a diversity, equity, and inclusion facilitator. She's a mentor at the Boston Women's Leadership Council, and I've always been very partial to authors. So she's an author of Ali Up.
Yep, that's right.
So Dai, would you like to tell me a little bit about your early life?
I would so love to. So my story is a little non-traditional, especially here in the US. I grew up in foster care. When I aged out of foster care, when I was a teenager, I became homeless. In an effort to sort of, in Boston, very, very expensive to live here. I couldn't find a place. So I moved across the country to Atlanta, where I ultimately spent the next 10 years. I put myself in college there. I would say probably one of my life milestones was being kicked out and being homeless, because it sort of pushed me out of my comfort zone and made me feel like, okay, well, do it or don't. What are you going to do now? Because now you're driving the car. You're driving your life car. So, I spent a little time in Atlanta before deciding that I was going to obtain a degree at Georgia State University. I am one of 3% of kids who have come out of foster care to ever do that. Wow. So I'm pretty proud of that. And it's intense. I have a lot of weird survivor guilt about that. So I would say that what brought me to where I am today is looking around and seeing that things were not, our values weren't what we say that they are, right? So we're telling people that our values are one thing, but then when it really comes down to it, hiring and all of the things that we do in business tend to be games of exclusion, right? Not inclusion. So I guess I got my start kind of looking around and feeling like I wasn't included and getting real mad about that. I felt like the goalpost kept changing, like they'd say, oh, Di, you got to do this. You got to finish your degree in order to be successful. Okay, I do that. Now what is it? Oh, now we're changing it. Okay. Are you going to maybe get a PhD? Y'all, So I would say that, milestone wise, I got to the point where I wanted to be myself. I wanted to do work that inspired me. And just coming to that conclusion changed everything. It changed the way I was going to do everything, because I wasn't trying to be small anymore. I wasn't trying to play small. I was trying to be what I'm here to be. So, that just changed the day, changed the game.
Fantastic. Yeah. So let's talk about, your area of interest and work, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yes.
Tell me about your role as the head of inclusion at Jambb. And maybe before that, tell me what does Jambb do?
Absolutely. So Jambb is a tech company in Boston. We do I guess the easiest way to talk about what we do right now is that we work with creators to create NFTs, so non-fungible tokens, right? So right now we have some folks that we're not allowed to talk about who we're working with, but we have some very high-end comedians that are working with us right now to create, these NFTs. So the work is fascinating and exciting, and I get to meet such amazing people every day. But what I do for Jambb as their head of inclusion has a lot more to do with hiring, sourcing, and creating teams and building teams more inclusively. And then as we grow, we're also putting policies in place from the ground so that, because we're a startup, so we're putting policies in place at the ground. So as we grow, we don't find ourselves in a position where we look around and it's 50 white people, right? So right now we're working on the day to think about diversity, equity, and inclusion is day 0. And I am there putting the work in to prove it. And one of the most fascinating things, one of the first jobs I ever ran for them, one of the first hiring sourcing gigs that I ever ran for them, I kind of showed them what I was going to do, and I laid out a rubric and what it was going to look like, why we do it this way. And people fought me. They were like, this is so much work. We don't want to do this. This is slow. And then at the very end of it, they could look back and see how the work got us to the conclusion that we wanted and the goal that we wanted. And then everybody was like, oh, all right, maybe this does have value. So, I mean, I don't think they ever thought it didn't, but I think that they were kind of, a little bit of me sometimes feels like they were just, sort of telling me what I wanted to hear. But then once they realized that what I was saying was true, then it was like, oh, okay, come on, let's do all this stuff. And it was like, okay, great. So
interesting. So, why, in your opinion, is diversity, equity, and inclusion beginning to get so relevant today? I mean, we've been talking about it for several decades, and yet it keeps spurting up, all over the world.
Yeah.
So why is it so much more relevant today?
I think it's not more relevant than ever it has been. I think we have more tools to show people what's really going on, if that makes sense. So if you think about, and I'm just going to speak to the US if that's okay, because my world history is less awesome than my US history. So here in the United States, we've sort of had this push and pull between civil rights, human rights, and what we're willing to stand for as a larger society. So there's always been that movement. I don't feel like it's new. What I do feel like is new is that people are seeing these things for the first time. People are seeing videos of folks acting in ways that we would not support on our behalf. And that's a real problem for us. That's a real problem for us in the DEI field, especially.
Right.
Speaking to those events that are happening in our country and worldwide, in fact, on a regular basis. So I don't think it's more relevant today. I think it's as relevant as it ever has been, but now more people are getting involved because more people can see it with their own eyes.
Sure. And
that makes sense.
And as an expert in this area, and despite so much work being done, the imbalances continue. What can be done to correct it faster?
I think recognizing that these imbalances exist is probably step one. So a lot of times I'll go into conversations with people, CEOs, executives, whatever, and they'll say to me, well, Di, we're all a family here. We don't have these problems. And then, of course, you start talking to any number of their employees, and suddenly they do have those problems. So I think recognizing all of us looking at the same thing and agreeing that we're seeing the same thing, and then coming to terms with how we're going to deal with it. But if we don't recognize it, then there's no accountability and nothing changes. So I think in terms of what we're seeing, even social justice wise, accountability first. Once we can all agree that this is what's really happening and this is what we're seeing, then we can have those conversations about how we fix this. But right now, we're not even, in the workforce in the US today, you see our big tech companies taking sort of a stand a little bit here and there. I'm not saying they aren't. I'm sure they're doing as much as they can. But, we haven't had that. what we call a come to Jesus moment. Like, we all need to come here. We need to talk about what's happening. We need to agree that this is happening, and not just putting it off onto the people who are suffering beneath it, to continuously prove and bear the onus of proving it to us, the majority community, I would say.
And what would go into, removing biases that exist in our society and among the communities that we live in?
Well, biases are how the human brain operates. So your brain can process about 40 bits of information at a time, and it's exposed to however million bits of information, right? And the gap between that is covered by your biases. So there are biases that exist that keep you safe, and that's why they're here. But unfortunately, our biases about people aren't right, but they feel right because we've continually, all of our media, all of our books, all of our continues that all of this is true, all of this is true, everything you think. So I would say that, biases are how the human brain works. We shouldn't feel ashamed of that, but we need to test what our biases are, and then be dealing with it. I mean, Harvard University has a great tool online, Project Implicit. You can go online and test your biases for yourself. And then you can do that self-education to figure out where your gaps are. So yeah, exactly. There are ways to deal with this. We just aren't dealing with it largely. So.
And, for someone who, you've done a lot of work on this, on this area.
Yeah.
A lot of the biases are also probably ingrained when we are growing up as children.
Of course they are.
At what stage should children or students be made aware of some of these challenges?
Yes. So again, I love that these aren't the softball questions. These are the hard ones. Okay. So I have 2 children. My son is 5 turning 6. My daughter is 3 turning 4. So my son, I started sort of talking to him about biases, racism, and sort of what we see out in the world, probably age appropriately around 3, right? We started sort of reading books to expose him to, some of the challenges that the world was going through right now. And I'm doing the same for my daughter. The shows we watch, all of those things are educational. Right. So I would say that that's person to person. You have to decide as a parent. But for me, as somebody in this field, each child is different, but my kids were ready to start talking about this stuff early. And recently, my son was at a playground, and he was, our caregiver texted me and was like, hey, none of the children here are playing with this black child. They are, being rather mean to him, but just so you know, your child went over, introduced himself and introduced your daughter, and they've been playing for the last 20 minutes. So when I shared the story on LinkedIn, I had so many Black women come to me and say, yes, thank you, because our, age 5 is exactly when we started feeling these feelings on the playgrounds and stuff. And so, I mean, right now, we were just seeing recently, schools in Texas, here in the US, were having these battles about whether or not anti-racism should be introduced to children. And parents were all they were all upset because they were under the impression that Texas was planning to teach racism to their children. But society teaches racism to your children. Your biases teach racism to your children. So if you aren't planning for that, and if you aren't showing up in better ways, or correcting that behavior, or correcting those TV shows as you're watching them with your kids, then they are already being sort of, I don't want to say indoctrinated, because that's a strong word, but they're kind of being indoctrinated into that without your consent regardless. So you might want to be thinking about it, in my opinion, in my humble mom opinion.
Very nice. And now, from your mom opinion, I'd love to get your opinion as a professional to say, how are you handling these at the workplace?
How am I handling it at the workplace? Well, I work in tech. So in tech, we basically assume that if you're here playing with us in our sandbox, that you are a grown-up, and certain things can be expected of you. Your inability to deal with other people or be inclusive of other people that are not yourself, I don't think that's a valued position that we need to take into account on your behalf. You are welcome to go and be an individual contributor anywhere. I don't think I'm not into inclusion is a valid point. Here in the States especially, we have we have this thing with our news where both sides need to be covered with exactly the same ferocity and the same, you know, a weight gravity. So you'll have somebody like some genius with a PhD, and they'll be talking about what's happening with X. And then, you know, some parent will come in and they'll be like, I disagree because I did my research. And it's like, at a certain point, we need to accept reality for everyone. And if these are our values, in order to join companies, you're going to need to at least be willing to self-educate on these topics so that everybody around you is comfortable and belongs in the space. I don't really feel like I don't like Black people. That's not valid at work.
Absolutely.
That's not valid in groups. That's not valid in society. So we don't take it in tech.
Okay.
I guess I would say.
Very well said. So I've got one more question for you on diversity before I move to your book.
Oh, please, all day.
You work in tech, and therefore obviously you've got a lot of young people, the millennials.
I do.
He's working.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I find the younger group of people, the millennials, the Gen Zs, are far more conscious of DEI, if I can use your term.
Oh yeah.
Than anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
How are they responding to the challenges of diversity and inclusion? And what has been your experience?
So I would say here in the US, at least, millennials, 50% of the workplace. I myself am an older millennial, not an old millennial, just an older one, like Mark Zuckerberg age.
Yeah.
So the generation before us, Gen X, expects sort of they expect that they have to show up at a certain level of professionalism to be considered, professional.
Mm-hmm.
However, millennials and Gen Z also we don't care, right? We care more about a company sharing our values than we do even comp. Mm-hmm. So big companies that aren't doing the right thing are having I don't want to name names, but they're having a really hard time recruiting, even though they're paying top dollar. Mm-hmm. And why is that? Why aren't they able to get millennials and Gen Zers? And it's because they aren't doing the work. Millennials and Gen Zers in particular, for the first time, are driving that change because it's not, it would be nice if you had, a DEI program. This is a requirement for me to join your workforce. And it's never been that way before. Even for me, I've only been in the real workforce for 35 years old. So not forever, but I still feel like there's been a drastic change from when I first started working to today. So I think that millennials and Gen Zers in particular are driving this movement because they demand that this is already handled, and it hasn't been yet. So now we're doing it.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So now let's move to your book.
Yes.
Ally Up, is that?
Yeah, Ally Up. Yep. I say ally. It's funny. Most people say ally. It's so weird.
No, ally is fine also.
Yeah.
Ally Up. Tell me about this book and what is your hypothesis?
Oh, so I started writing this book in 2019, so before the pandemic. I got in touch with a writing coach and an editor. I signed off on all my contracts, and I'm telling you, because you've written 7 books, right? Mm-hmm. So you know how it is. So I sign off on all my contracts, and then I start getting, my editor's like, this is a really narrow topic. Not very many people are going to be that interested. And I was like, you know what? It's just going to be a baseline of information for companies so that if I am going into work with them, I can give them these books. They have this information so that they are prepared to have these conversations with me so that we can set measurable goals in DEI. He's like, okay, nobody cares. Perfect. Whatever. Right. So in January, I started getting emails from people that I had wanted to work with previously via LinkedIn, sending me articles about, Google was quietly dismantling and then rebuilding their DEI team. So, some CEOs were like, oh, you're going to have to find a new hustle. DEI's time in the sun is over. And I was just like, all right, well, I'm already pot committed, right? I'm already committed to this.
Sure.
And then so I'm writing in a pandemic. I'm home with 2 kids. I've got my son who's as I say, doing kindergarten virtually. So, it was not a great year, but I write the whole book. I'm done with it. All of a sudden, we start seeing this, George Floyd is murdered in the U.S. Suddenly the U.S. is on fire, right? And folks are like, oh my God, Di, are you finished with this book? What are we doing next? What's up? And so now I had to expand on it a little bit and include more social justice. And I'm happy with that. I'm happy people are here. But the book is now and has always been a baseline of knowledge for allies, aspiring allies, advocates, folks who want to do better for their employees in the workforce, to just be a baseline of information to have these conversations. I interviewed hundreds of people and their interviews are in there. There are over 200 footnotes and jokes from me. The whole thing is just me telling you the entire story, start to finish, covering as I'm talking to you right now, covering the entirety of the employee life cycle and places within that where you can build up your knowledge to have a more inclusive workforce. And it just, at every single level, there are things you can do if you care about this. And that's why I wrote the book. And I'm really excited that we are all sort of joining this movement already in progress together.
And is this book available on Amazon?
The book, oh my gosh. So I'll tell you, yes, first of all. Second of all, it's in pre-order on Amazon. Second of all, I was on a phone call with somebody that I was pretty trying to impress. And he says to me, oh, Di, is your book on Amazon? And I said, oh, no, it's not on Amazon yet because it won't be available on Amazon until August. And he looks and he goes, ooh, Ally Up is on Amazon. Is that you? And I freaked out. And I was like, oh my God, somebody else has written my book. And he was finally like, wait, this is your name though, right? I'm like, oh, so it's just up early. But of course, me being me, I had to freak out first. But yes, that's the long version of the short question.
No, it's very exciting. It's very exciting when your book comes up in the pre-order position,
Right? I know. I saw it and I just sat there for like 20 minutes, just like, wow, my book is on Amazon. Like I wrote that. That's my name. So I'm excited to be alive, obviously.
Terrific. Okay. So, Di, I'm going to move now to the last segment of our conversation. A few questions to you personally. My first question to you is that, for someone who's had such an amazing life, you've had your own set of challenges, beautiful children, excellent job. What are some of the core values you believe in?
I mean, inclusion, obviously. Education, especially self-education, I would say is another big one. And activism, right? Like if you see something happening to people around you, stand up. If you have the power, use it. Get in there, get involved. If you see, look, we all have people that we love in our life. I have children. What are we going to say in 20 years when they look back on this time? What am I going to say in 20 years when my 25-year-old then son says, what did you do when you saw that everything around you was wrong? This work is my stand. Like, those are my values. My values are showing up exactly as the person you want your children to be.
Very interesting. And a follow-up question to that is, from where you are today, what does success mean to Di?
Ooh, so I would say success is the ability to live your own life as you see fit without having to make yourself smaller. So if you can get a job and that job values you for exactly who you are and your family values you for exactly who you are and you're getting paid the kind of money you want to be getting paid, that's success in my mind. It's not vacations or cars or any of that stuff. It's you getting to be you learning as you're supposed to learn. That's what I think success is. Wonderful. And I feel like I'm very successful, actually.
Wonderful. That's really wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I've got time for two more questions for you.
Yes, hit me.
My next question is that who or what inspires you to keep pushing yourself and doing, so much good to the world?
Oh God, there's so many great women activists right now that I am so here for. Kamala Harris, oh my God, Stacey Abrams, Ibram X. Kendi, Oprah, obviously, Beyonce. People are out there doing amazing, Tamika Murray, people are out there doing amazing work right now. And I am inspired to keep going by those folks. So I am inspired to keep showing up classy, awesome, fighting, just as those folks are. So
wonderful.
I have so many great influences in my life, I would say.
Wonderful. And my last question to you, and this question is about failure. The part of the world that I come from, I've often said that parents don't teach children it's okay to fail.
Yes.
You're always fail, and I'm sure you've met lots of Indians and Asians constantly being told, be first in class, go to the head of the line, etc. And
Oh yeah.
yet, yet people fail and people learn.
Yeah.
So my question to you is, what have been some of your learnings from some of your mistakes?
Oh God. Ash, honestly, I fall on my face all the time.
Mhm.
I'm very big on failure. I learn the most from failure. I love to fail. I think anytime, I don't love it like, oh yeah, this was so great. I
Mhm.
love it like when I can sort of think about it after, like, oh my God, this was such a great learning opportunity. And I changed so much from my failures, whereas my successes, I don't really change that much. So how it impacts me as a parent is I'm teaching my children to fail. Like we say to our kids all the time, mistakes happen. Don't lie about it. Accept what happened, accept what you did, but definitely fail. Fail, try. You don't, okay. So the problem with failure and people avoiding failure is that if you don't try, you never fail, right? If you don't come outside your comfort zone where the rest of us have to play in the arena, right? Where the rest of us are fighting our fights, you never fail, but you also kind of never live either. So for me, I fail all the time. There's stairs in my house. I probably fall down them every 3 months. Just I fail all the time. And you just develop this comfort with yourself. And in fact, what it does is build your confidence because you know you can fall and get back up. So fail all the time, fail vigorously. I'm a big fan of failure. So thank you for asking.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
thank you
thanks.
so much.
My pleasure.
Such an amazing conversation. I love
Yeah.
all your comments on diversity.
Thank you.
I'm going to pre-order your book if it's available in India. But
Yeah,
I'll get the
right
Kindle
on the
edition. I'm sure it will be. But good luck for the book.
Thank you.
Thank you again for being on my show.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.